What's that I hear? The DCEU is in trouble again? Well, this looks like a job for Superman!
Hey! It's my turn, asshole.
And who are you supposed to be?
Psst. Aquaman.
Wink. What the hell? What is up, everybody? RandomRandomMan here, and judging from this ridiculous hat I'm currently wearing, it is Christmas time. Yes, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays for whatever you all are celebrating during this time of year. As I previously stated with my review for Mary Poppins Returns, I am keeping up a tradition that I started 4 years ago with me wearing this big itchy hat while reviewing a movie on or around Christmas. And for the second review in a row this year, I am doing so again as I am bringing you my review for Aquaman. Based on the DC Comics character of the same name, the plot of this superhero film basically follows the title character, aka Arthur Curry, played by Jason Momoa, as he is the heir to the underwater kingdom of Atlantis and must step forward to lead his people against his half-brother Orm, played by Patrick Wilson, who seeks the throne and wants to unite the 7 underwater kingdoms against the surface world. Going into this movie, I had moderate expectations. I did not know that much of what to think going into this movie, as when it comes to the DCEU and the films that have come thus far, they've had a pretty rocky road starting out in 2013 with Man of Steel, which I'll admit I did like quite a bit, even though not everything landed well with that movie. It was certainly ambitious and got off to an interesting start for the franchise. Then Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice, and Suicide Squad came, and I was less enthusiastic about those films, especially as time has gone by. Then, in 2017, we had Wonder Woman, which is easily my favorite of the entire DCEU film slate thus far, and it's the only movie of the series that I felt compelled to own on Blu-ray. Then later that year, last year, 2017, we also got Justice League, which, yeah, wasn't the best movie either. It was much maligned by quite a few people, and I personally will admit that I gave it more credit than it deserved because I did think it was an enjoyable, if disposable time, and I'm also tired of the DCEU hate, as I do want to like these movies, but there are certain things about them that do hold me back. So now we have Aquaman coming over a year after Justice League, and it was interesting to see an Aquaman film come into play, as he had a first appearance in Batman vs. Superman as a cameo, and then had a full-on supporting role in Justice League, to which I enjoyed Momoa's performance as Aquaman in that film, but he was probably my least favorite character introduced into that movie. And now with the advent of his solo movie coming about, I was interested, if apprehensive, as well. And to my surprise also, looking back, this is actually the first full-length theatrical feature film that we have ever gotten with Aquaman in the lead. Much like with Wonder Woman last year, that was the first time we ever got a feature-length theatrical film starring her. This is the same case with Aquaman. When it comes to Aquaman as a character, I stated many times in the past that I am not that well versed in comic book culture, whether it's Marvel, DC, or whatever, but I know for a fact that in pop culture, Aquaman has had a specific reputation in terms of who he is and his power set. I mean, he's been made fun of a lot for being that superhero that can talk to fish, not being of much use, what have you. And seeing him in the photos, footage, and other things leading up to Aquaman, I was interested, and I did go into this movie optimistic that it could bring some new things to the table for this franchise. Starting out with the cast and their performances, we of course have Aquaman / Arthur Curry, played by Jason Momoa. Now again, even though I wasn't that big on Momoa in Justice League, where we saw him in a supporting role within that film, in his own feature-length film where he is the lead, I really bought into him as a character this time around. A lot of it does have to do with Momoa as a performer, as he not only has the physique to really make you not want to mess with this Aquaman, but also just in the way that his arc develops over the course of this film. Aquaman was born out of what is considered frowned upon within the underwater world of Atlantis, and he is reluctant to take the throne even though he is the rightful heir. And you can see what Momoa injects with this kind of reluctant attitude, while also being really cool with that dick swagger he has all around and being a swashbuckling type of character within his own power set. There's also Amber Heard as Mira, who is the love interest to Arthur Curry, and she's not the typical kind of love interest, as there is a love-hate relationship between the two of them. While I thought the romance that would eventually blossom between the two was sort of forced, what was interesting to me was that the way she just pops up out of nowhere in the movie, it's almost as if the brief interaction they had in Justice League last year was really forgotten about or whatever. I have no idea what the continuity is like with this entire franchise as a whole, but with Heard as a performer, I think she's pretty good here. I've not been that much of a fan of her in the past, but here I thought she held her own. Other heavy hitters here include the likes of Willem Dafoe as Vulko, the mentor to Aquaman who trains him within combat. I thought he was a nice addition to this film. There's quite a bit of de-aging CGI used on him for some flashback sequences, and I thought that was done well. I'll mention the effects more later on. There's also Patrick Wilson as Orm/Ocean Master. He got the shaft when it comes to names here. I mean, Arthur Curry has Aquaman, Orm has Ocean Master. Yeah, doesn't roll off the tongue just as well. But I thought he was really in his element here. I've never seen him play this kind of over-the-top villain in any other role beforehand, but here he is really committed to this kind of role, being really bombastic and verbose with his actions, and he's also pretty vocal about his disgust for his brother, even though he hadn't met him prior to the events of this movie, all of that. There's also Dolph Lundgren as Nereus, the father to Amber Heard's Mira, and it's interesting to see him here not that long after seeing him reprise the role of Ivan Drago in Creed 2 about a month ago. And here, I thought he was another good addition. Same thing with Yahya Abdul-Mateen II as David Kane/Black Manta. For the screen time he does have, I thought he was a pretty neat addition too, again, for the screen time he does have. And then finally, we have Nicole Kidman as Atlanta and Tamara Morrison as Thomas Curry. These are the parents to Arthur Curry. Kidman and Morrison, I think, both do strong jobs as well, portraying the parents of Curry and also being sort of guiding lights to them, even if they are not on screen with Momoa's Curry at every moment of the film. So all in all, with the cast of this film, I think everybody does a solid job, but of particular note does have to go to Jason Momoa as the title character. The writing of this film sets up the narrative to be part origin story and part finding one's place, or a fish out of water story, if you would, as Curry himself is going back into the water to see if he is really fit to be the leader of Atlantis, though it is his birthright to be so. The movie begins with Nicole Kidman's Atlanta washing up onto the lighthouse where Tamara Morrison's Thomas Curry lives, and these two then strike up a relationship with each other, and they do eventually have Arthur Curry. Time goes by, and without saying too much, Kidman's Atlanta has to go back to the underwater surface, and Arthur is left with his dad. And then we do see Curry grow up a bit and really come to terms with his abilities, and later on determining if he should be the King of Atlantis. This is a story that we've seen done before, and the way it begins, I thought it opened up the narrative quite well. It did the job that it needed to do, and also setting up what does go on with all of the other details encompassed with this movie. As with the rest of the writing, there is a lot packed into this film. That is both for good and for bad, as what does come together here keeps the narrative very lively. It always kept me interested for the most part. But at the same time, too, there is a lot jam-packed into this movie. Yahya Abdul-Mateen II's character, Black Manta, I felt that him as a secondary villain could have been saved for a later movie.
That's what you gotta stick through the mid-credits scene for.
But he was a part of my favorite sequence of the entire film, which I'll mention in a bit. One other pro I'll give this movie writing-wise is that it did feel like a stand-alone solo outing for this title character, much in the way Wonder Woman was last year. It did have me mostly engaged, and it went to various locations that do contribute to the visual look of this movie, and it also feeling like something that is an adventure that does scale a bunch of different places. This brings me to the world building of this movie, and I thought it was immersive to say the least. I would compare it to the likes of Avatar, to where the world that movie set up in Pandora being this lush, prospering place had me suckered in from the get-go when Atlantis is seen for the first time, and also from Black Panther earlier this year in Wakanda being one of the most visually inventive places I've seen in a comic book or superhero movie as well. And just the overall design of Atlantis, and also just the rest of the movie looking so vibrant. It felt like I was underwater during these sequences, and part of this made me realize that it did kind of take this long to get an Aquaman movie made, not just within the current DCEU film slate, but also with the technology needing to work as well as it did for this movie to really be effective, and it looking like this underwater world has come to life. And speaking of the technology, yeah, there is a lot of CGI in this movie. A lot of the CGI, I would say, in Aquaman did look pretty good. I will admit, at times, it did look quite a bit dodgy. In some instances, when characters are swimming or moving around underwater, it did look artificial. This movie is directed by James Wan, and he was actually one reason I was holding out some optimistic hope for this movie, as he is a director that is pretty versatile. He is known for his horror movie roots, having jump-started 3 horror film franchises with Saw, Insidious, and The Conjuring. And even recently, he did 2015's Furious 7, the 7th film in the Fast and the Furious franchise. And that's my personal favorite, as he showed that he can jump from horror to action effectively. And what he did here with Aquaman in doing this big budget superhero film, it's another feather in his cap for showing how much he is versatile in working within different genres. On an action front, as he proved with Furious 7, he made the action sequences really exciting and riveting. All the action, I would say, for the most part, was well choreographed. It was visually stable. I was able to see what was going on here. My favorite sequence in particular is this chase between Black Manta and his goons after Aquaman and Mira through this village in Sicily, Italy. And with the action too, I have to mention how it is stylistically, as it is pretty over the top in a lot of instances. That was intentional from the way I perceived the movie being presented to us, as it's something that cannot be done unless it has a little bit of far-fetched nature with it, as this is about a character who has underwater powers. He can talk to fish. He is somebody that can swim really quickly, and that added on to the huge enjoyability factor that this movie has, and also creating a tone that is serious in some ways, but mostly is self-aware. I think this movie is self-aware in that, yeah, there is a bunch of cheese to it, and the action can get ridiculous at certain points. Another technical merit I have to praise here is the original score. Rupert Gregson-Williams did the music for this movie, and I thought it was unique, and not just being orchestral in a lot of the epic moments, but in between some of the main action set pieces, It sounded like it was electronic and done with synthesizers, almost reminding me of what was done in the 1970s and the 1980s, feeling like a score that would have been composed by Giorgio Moroder. As I've said throughout this review, I was entertained by Aquaman for the most part. And I say the most part now specifically because running time-wise, this movie is a bit lengthy at almost 2.5 hours. And when you counter in all of what I said with the writing, packing in a bunch of stuff plot-wise, all of the visuals that you take in, and really the movie being almost non-stop action, it does get exhausting to some points. And that made me feel like this movie didn't need to be that long in the first place. But with all of that being said, I found Aquaman to be a splashing good time. This movie is not going to be one to turn over a new leaf within you and become a fan of the DCEU. And I'll admit, I'm still not entirely that big of a fan of the DCEU, but I do think Aquaman is a step in the right direction in terms of knowing where the focus of this franchise is going to go. And with these solo movies, Aquaman and Wonder Woman specifically, Wonder Woman is still my favorite of these movies thus far. It shows that by going and doing their own things first, they can still create for some cinematic experiences that are fun. It's not my favorite superhero / comic book film of the year. No, that goes to the recent Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Not just my favorite animated film of the year, it's also my favorite comic book / superhero film of 2018. And if you've already seen that, or if you're looking for some more superhero / comic book fun, then Aquaman is something to see, as I recommend it. My final verdict for Aquaman is 3.5 out of 5 stars. Thank you all, as always, for watching. Be sure to like this video, comment on what you thought of Aquaman. Social media links in the description. Subscribe to my channel for more, and I'll catch you on the next movie review.